Hey, Kate.
Hi, Anne.
I haven't seen you in a while. How you doing?
Good. How are you? I was hoping I might find you here if I came a little early.
Yeah, I'm kind of testing the setup here because I'm going to try something a little different.
Good for you.
It'll either work or it'll be a total
Can I
disaster. But
can I help you troubleshoot it? I mean, can I
I,
help you get it like going?
I think I have it. I'm afraid to touch it now because it seems to be working. But keep your phone
Okay.
handy because it's a phone poll word cloud thing. So
Okay. All right. Cool.
we shall see. How you been doing?
Pretty good.
Staying,
Been surviving.
yeah, staying off campus like a lot of us.
Yes. I've been working at home since March. I really I'm in no rush to go back to campus.
Yeah, I'm actually in my office right now. I'm over here 2 days a week because I'm teaching 2 classes in person.
Yeah, I can understand if you're teaching, it's a good routine to keep up, to just keep
Yeah,
going into the office, and even
yeah,
if you're
except
teaching
when
online.
my students say, "Well, I won't be in class today because I tested positive," and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
I've had that happen a couple
yeah,
times now.
uh, yeah. I saw today that there's been a little bit of a spike. I was looking up, they have this COVID data visualizer that you can go
Yeah,
to. It's just a slight upturn, which let's hope it doesn't go any higher.
on campus or just in the
Yeah.
area? On
It's
campus.
the local one. I think it's Champaign County.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's spiking everywhere else. It should be here too, I suppose.
Yep. I'm just gonna run and get a can of soda. I realized I don't have a beverage in my hand here. I just got back from taking a walk, so I'll be right back.
Nice. Okay.
You can probably hear everything. I left my microphone unmuted. You're getting an audio tour of my home.
I was on a group call this morning for a faculty working group, and one of the people on there was having an extended conversation with his wife, didn't realize he was unmuted, and
Oh,
he's just going at it. And then he kind of goes, "Oh." It was pretty funny. Yeah.
see, was it your classes that one time I came to with a photographer and we took pictures. Was that, I know it was an engineering classroom. Was that yours?
I think it was. I
Um,
think it was.
you,
Hey,
There's
Leon.
Leon.
Hi, and hello, Kate. How are you?
Good.
Well, it's great to see you. And I've got to read what's behind you.
Well, what's behind me? Oh, that, yeah.
Oh, a very Latin aqua. Oh, portable water. Oh, is that from your South American expeditions?
That was a very early gift from a community I worked with, and I just kind of keep it up in my
That's
office.
beautiful.
Isn't that
Is it
nice?
from Guatemala? There it says it, Guatemala, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Yeah,
how cool is that?
yeah,
It's
back from
funny
the old
because
days.
you obviously have your camera up kind of high, and you're appearing in the lower part of my screen right now. So when you were talking to Anne, you were looking up right at her square.
It's worked out like that. It's supposed to be like that. Shame, but Anne, thank you very much for joining us. I really
Oh,
appreciate
I'm
it.
happy to do this. This is
And
great.
Kate,
And
I
I
know
actually, I
I know,
updated my presentation, so.
no, cool. Kate, with your permission, can I just check with Anne that everything is cool?
Oh yeah,
And
that's fine.
no, if you can just give us 30 seconds, please don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I thought maybe if I came in a little early, I'd have a chance to say hi to Anne. And
No, that's very cool. I know
Yeah, we haven't had a
you
chance
guys.
to catch up.
I know you
yeah,
guys know each other well.
I'll just put myself on mute here for the
No,
time.
no, don't. Please stay there.
Okay.
And no, please don't go. And please, can
Okay.
you share your screen? You should be able to.
Let's see if it works. Hopefully it will.
I hope it does. Oh, that looks beautiful in Illinois orange.
In Illinois, orange. Yeah, well, I like to think autumn burnt orange, but I suppose, yeah, it is Illinois.
I don't know what it is. I mean,
It
all these
looks really great.
Pantone colors, but it looks beautiful.
Really
And
great.
thanks. I
Good,
just want
good.
to confirm with you that everything works. It
Okay,
works.
excellent. I'm
And
going to
you're
stop
welcome to
sharing
go
for the
out of it.
moment.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Because I'll just introduce you using a little bit of a different slide, which I believe is this one. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to keep this on because we're going to soon be joined by a few other people from around the campus. It's
Cool.
going to be a small group, Anne.
I like small
We're
groups.
not expecting more than 20 people.
Oh, that's perfect.
But I believe it's going to be a mixed bunch. And I hope it's going to lead to a nice discussion.
That's my favorite kind of group.
Yeah. So Kate,
Yeah.
how did you have you and Anne collaborated on some project?
Not on a project exactly, but I've helped her in the classroom from time to time. And we were just actually, when you popped in, we were talking about a former student who worked for me who came to take pictures in her class. And
Oh,
I was just about to tell Anne that young person, her name is Avia. She now has her own production company, or she's a
wow.
member of a production company in Chicago. I
Really?
mean, I always knew she was a talented student, but she's just going to surpass everyone's, at least, I knew she has a lot of talent. So it's really good to see her, she's clearly on the road to success.
Yes. Well, that sounds amazing. Whilst we've got 2 minutes to go, I'd like to welcome Mina. Mina, thanks for joining us. And Jessie. Now, Jessica introduced me to Anne in the first place. So Jessica, thanks a lot. Hi to you.
Hey, Jessica.
Hello. I'm excited.
How are you doing? And I believe Professor Vakakis is also with us. Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you? Kalimera, Professor Vakakis.
Yes, hello. I'm joining with my cell phone and I was trying to unmute myself.
Oh,
Hello.
sorry. But thank you very much. Evcharisto. It's
Thank
very
you.
kind of you to join. I'd also like to welcome Professor Tim Hale. Hello, Tim. How are you?
Good.
Tim, have you met Anne?
I don't think so. You look familiar. I think I've seen your picture a few times, but I don't think we've met.
Yeah, I don't think we have either. It's nice to meet you, Tim.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Tim, I'm going to ask everyone, because we're going to be a small group, just to briefly say where they're from, if you don't mind. And I'm just waiting for a few more people to arrive that told me that they would be attending. So if you don't mind, we're going to be marking time a little bit. So I know that Kate and Anne know each other well. Is there anyone else online who's collaborated with you, Anne?
Not at the moment.
Shelley, good afternoon, Shelley. Have you worked with Anne? Shelley Schmidt from Food Science and Human Nutrition.
So I don't think she can hear us yet, but there she is.
Still connecting.
Don't know about that.
Yeah.
Gee, and it seems we have Professor Petros Safronis with us. Is that so, Professor Safronis? Kalimera, Professor Safronis?
He's muted.
He's muted. Okay, so the group is growing.
Here I am. Yes. Good evening.
Oh, good afternoon, Kalimera. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm strong and healthy. That's all I can say now, right? And I'm happy.
That's very good. And I wish you very well. And I hope you stay healthy and active. And I wish the same to everyone.
Yes. The same to everyone. Yes, exactly.
No, thanks. And also to you, Ting. I'm going to welcome everyone now. I'd like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. And if it's okay with you, Anne, if people have questions, can they interrupt you at any time?
Absolutely. In
Fantastic.
fact, I prefer that.
Okay, thanks a lot. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome everyone to this special, we're really happy to have you here, and the special presentation by Dr. Anne Perry Witmer. It's called Contextual Engineering. Now, when I think about context, I always think about the Chinese story about the elephant and the blind people feeling the elephant at certain parts. If you touch the trunk and you ask the person, what are you interacting with? Could be a pipe or a tube. And if you touch the tail, that could be a paintbrush. If you don't see the whole context, well, you're going to be in a messy situation. But I'd like to welcome specifically the engine sub-team and students and faculty from all other departments who are here. And we're so looking forward to Anne, who's going to tell us a little bit more about context. Now, I'm really glad that I've got two people with so much who are Greek, because I want to mention something about the Nicomachean ethics of Aristotle. And my understanding of Aristotle's forms of definition, or forms of knowledge that he actually speaks about. The first is techne, which really pertains to the know-how. It's got to do with skill, with craft, and it's context dependent. And then you get epistemology, study of knowledge, the knowing why we're doing what we're doing. That seems to be context independent. And then there's a third part, phronesis. That's wisdom. Now, it's got to do with how do we achieve an end goal? How do we deliver change? How do we enhance life? It's certainly context dependent. It appears to me that at university, especially in engineering education, we do very, very well by engaging our students in techne, the knowing how to do things. They can solve equations and come up with beautiful simulations. Sometimes they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. But when it comes to the actual implementation of the techne and the episteme, I believe in engineering education, at least, we've got a long way still to go. How do we link what we're doing with the ethics? And it's such a privilege for me to introduce Anne, who's a research scientist at the Applied Research Institute. You've read her bio. I'm not going to repeat everything, but it's those of you that do not know Anne, she's a lecturer at ABE and also at the Carl Illinois College of Medicine and also at Electrical Computer Engineering. You've got a long CV and a long resume. Anne founded the Contextual Engineering Research Group. She explores aspects of theory and practice associated with humanitarian engineering. And you'll see a beautiful gift that she received from people in, well, you can talk about that, Anne. Behind you, you'll see this beautiful brown gift that she got. She teaches multidisciplinary courses that draw upon social sciences. To do what? To inform technical design, decision-making for infrastructure engineers, designing of water systems, which I guess that's the gift that you got, Anne. That's a water system that you and your team designed in South America, Central America. And in addition to her PhD, she holds a master's and a bachelor's in civil engineering from Illinois. She's also got a BS in journalism. And very few people know that she also has a bachelor's in art from Boston University. And thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you're most welcome to start your presentation. Thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you, Leon. Thank you. I'm going to flip over here to my screen, and I'm hoping everybody's seeing this now.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Thank you so much for allowing me to talk to everybody today. This is a wonderful opportunity to meet all of you and also to share a little bit about what I do, because I've been sort of flying under the radar for almost 7 years now on campus, and I think we've reached a point where we're ready to step out in the light and start getting on our soapbox a little bit more aggressively. And I think Leon really captured very well the importance of thinking about these things, context in engineering design, because it is, we're finding, quintessentially important in technical design, but it's something that we're unaccustomed to connecting to engineering, both in education and in practice. And I'll mention too that I did practice as an engineer for more than a decade in between my stints here at Illinois. So I know what what's involved in taking the technology, taking the scientific understanding and putting it into practice for real life clients. And I think that's had a pretty profound impact on the research that we're doing now. So I'm going to share this with you, but I'm going to ask on this first slide, if it works, that everybody get your cell phones out, because we're going to try something here. This doesn't have the ID number, but if you could get your phone out and log on to vivox.app, we're going to try something at the beginning just to test context and how it actually is relevant to what we do as engineers. So bear with me on this, but if you can get that set up, we'll need it in just a moment. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what context is in engineering. I'd like to show you why, from my experience, particularly working internationally, where I got that beautiful tapestry behind me, as well as a number of other things that litter my office now. This occurred because I was working with populations that I personally had never really become familiar with before I started working with them. And they are the people who showed me why context is so important in engineering design. And then we'll spend just a brief time exploring how you actually apply context in engineering decision-making. Couple disclaimers, we are talking about the social sciences occasionally. This is a technical process. And it's incredible how often I have to remind people, even people who have gone through, the kind of the contextual engineering training process. In fact, this morning I was in a working group for a proposal with a group of colleague engineering faculty, and at one point we were talking about tasks, and one of our distinguished colleagues said, "Well, you take care of the colleagues, the context. I can find somebody who knows something about the engineering." I want to stress that this is about engineering, even though we're talking about the social sciences, that this is a technical process. And also the other thing I want to mention as a disclaimer is we're going to be looking at some examples from international work, but the farther I go in engineering with context, the more I realize that context doesn't just apply internationally. It's much more obvious the impact that applying context has when you're working with an unfamiliar population, but it's every bit as relevant to domestic processes, to infrastructure, as well as products, to entrepreneurship and business. And we're even starting to apply it into things like organizational dynamics. It's got some pretty strong significance pretty much across the board. Doesn't really hurt in like family life too. I haven't found a connection to pets yet, but I'm working on that one. So why do we care about context? Well, I want to show you these two pictures, which I took last January when I traveled to Ecuador with a group of students from Engineers Without Borders. We're working with the community in El Garango, Ecuador, which is on the western coast. Well, there's only one coastline in Ecuador. It's on the coastline of Ecuador. Which means it's in the lowlands. It's not up in the Andes, and it's not in the rainforests on the east side of Ecuador. This is pretty much plains. It's a very dry area. And I want to show you these two houses because we want to get a sense of what these two houses say to you. So these two homes are in the same community. And I'm going to ask you to get your phones now And this is not giving the Vivox app. Let me
I think, Anne, I think we need a number. I've got the app fired up here and it's
we
asking
do, and
for-
I'm not sure why it's not giving it, but I am going to get it for you right now to tell you what it is. I'm not sure why it's not showing there. So if you will bear with me just for a second while I bring that up, I will tell you that number. In the meantime, I'd like you to just think about this particular house. See, I knew that no matter what I did to prepare for this, something like this would happen. Let's see if I can find this quickly. I'm going to, here it is. Here it is. Okay, we're going to reconnect and see if I can get it for you. There's the number. Did that work?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the number you're going to use. And what I'd like you to do when I open this for 20 seconds is to type in as many words that you associate with this house. Okay, what does this house say to you about the people who live there, the type of construction, the community conditions, the values, the beliefs, anything that this tells you, I'd like you to enter. And you can enter as many words as you want, just enter one at a time, and it'll go. Are we ready? That did not start. We're now going to start it somehow. Enter. No. This is not being friendly with me. Isn't that strange? Okay. I apologize. This was working a moment ago. Ah, there we go. Okay, I'm going to go back. Hold on. Stop. You wouldn't believe how many times today I worked on getting this to work right. Okay. Delete. Are we ready? Go. As many words as you can think of that are associated with this house. All right. And that should close the poll. Let's see what we got. Poor. Poor. Unstable. Display creative porch. Wooden, rickety, simple, limited, resourceful, shabby. Okay, now keep those in mind. We're going to do the same thing, I hope, with this other one, which suddenly is not showing me the prompt that I need. So we're going to try to get to it. I don't want to go there. Okay, are we ready? We're going to do the same thing for this house. All right, any words that come to mind when you look at this house. Go. And we're done. Let's see what we came up with here. Protected, solid, wealthy, comfortable, sturdy, warm, colorful, hardworking, effective. Okay, now let's talk. I want to put this into context for you because this is interesting, and these are typically the sort of responses we get on these two houses. Here's what's interesting about these houses. The house on the right is relatively new. The house on the left is, I believe, about 30 years old. This is an area that was largely destroyed by the earthquake. I believe it was 4 years ago now. And the residents in the house on the right actually lived underneath a tarp for a year before this masonry house was built for them as part of a government project. What's kind of remarkable about this, both houses have an equivalent number of appliances in them. They both have electricity. They both have refrigerators. They both have flat screen television sets. And remarkably, they both have sound systems that would put my own sound system to shame in the United States. And maybe the most fascinating is of these two houses, by far the most comfortable house for living is the one on the left, because this is equatorial, hence Ecuador. It is incredibly warm there. And to have a sealed house with masonry block is stiflingly hot. The power structure in the community is such that some of the leaders of the community live in houses such as the one on the left. Some of the poorest people live in the house on the right. Now, you wouldn't guess that from looking at that, would you? Obviously, the words that we chose to define these two different houses reflect our experience, not the experience of Ecuadorians. And so for us to travel there and use our own context to define what should be built and how it should be built there could completely miss the mark for the society we'd be working for. So that's a quick demonstration of context. Why do we care about context? Well, if we ignore it, we may produce something that is less durable, less sustainable, and results in a reduced adoption of the technology that we use or the science that we use, that we bring. This is not only applicable to alternative societies, to non-industrial societies. Context exists, but it may be a little bit harder to spot in any process that involves people in place. We're actually doing some work on context with the community in Illinois right now. That's subject to the same rules and constraints and power structures and everything that we are. But it's a very different society and has very different needs. So what is context? Here's how I define it. It's a condition of a place, a people, or a resident set of beliefs. And that third one should not be disregarded as irrelevant, because beliefs and core values are really critical to context. These are things that are valuable enough to the people you're working with that they preserve it and they promulgate it. But these, particularly the values, may conflict with the standards that we're accustomed to adhering to, or what we would consider best available practices, such as structures in which we live. We don't think of stripped bamboo as an acceptable standard for construction of a house in Illinois. That's definitely a conflict with us. The significance of context may not be obvious to the practitioner. It doesn't present itself, particularly when we have our own experiences. And the value of it may appear irrelevant to someone who's not familiar with the context. Again, with those houses, the value of stripped bamboo, it seems, absurd to us to say that that's a superior building material because we're not familiar with that context. Maybe the most important thing about context is not transferable from one place to another. That what we learn about our own context and how it differs from a context in Ecuador or in Senegal or in Nepal is going to be very different in each place, and you can't carry from one place to another. So how do we recognize context if it can be this hidden thing? And we start in assessing context with ourselves. This is something that in my engineering classes tends to make engineering students very uneasy at first. And for the year-long course that I taught until we were banned from traveling, we would spend about the first half of the first semester looking at how to recognize context. And by about this time every year, the engineering students would just have had it. And they just didn't understand the point of this anymore. And when are we going to design something? Here's what they eventually understand, but here's what we teach them is we all have multiple levels of perception that we slot into when we're working with somebody else. And typically the lowest level of perception is awareness. So if somebody is going to be developing a product for use in Sierra Leone, you know that Sierra Leone's another part of the world. You know that the income is lower there. So you know that you're not going to make something gold-plated, probably, if you want the populace to use it. That's an awareness, right? But you don't know the people who this is going to be put in the hands of, right? Until you go there and interact and understand how things are going to be used, you have nothing more than awareness. going there and interacting allows you to attest to the conditions. Now, I always say that attestation is the most dangerous level of perception, because that's the level where you go and you say, well, I've experienced, I know everything. But you're still going and looking at it from your own experience and your own perspective, your own filters, much the way we looked at those houses in Ecuador and looked at the one as wealthy and the other as poor, because that reflected our own perspective. Even though, and our students viewed it the same way initially, even though they were there experiencing it. What they needed to do was become more integrated into the thought processes and living experience of the people they were working with. And we call that assimilation. And at that point, you're much better able to understand. And I'm not saying you're able to understand perfectly, but you're able to get closer to that tip of the triangle here, where you have a sharp understanding not only of what the conditions are, but why they're that way. That's where we want to get. Now, I have that fourth level. When I started studying this 3 or 4 years ago, I found that oftentimes, and I'll talk about how we assess this, but oftentimes when people have spent a long, long time in a place, they see things differently than other people who have been there for a short period of interaction. And we refer to that as integration. It's kind of like going native. What it reflects is being in a place long enough that you start identifying your perceptive filter shifts to a segment of a population, and you start seeing it as your friends or your colleagues in the population see it, and you lose that God's eye perspective. That's kind of where we want to get to, that vertex, and not go too far, because it can benefit you, but it's a really fragile place to be in. It can just send you off the wrong end if you're not careful. Okay, this is just we had to create a model for contextual engineering, and this is very involved. And there's my University of Illinois tribute, you know, the orange and the blue and all that. Let me give you a simplified version of this, because the petals of this flower, by the way, are all the areas that my undergraduate and graduate researchers are working on right now to really pin this down. But this is the simplified model, and these are the things that are really critical to once you've calibrated your perspective by understanding where you fall in that triangle model, then you can start assessing context by looking at the global, the local, the people, and the process. And what I mean by that is the global is all those overarching conditions that exist. For example, if I work in Nigeria, I know Nigeria was a colonized country until within my lifetime, I think, or a year or so of my lifetime. I know that there's a strong British influence on Nigeria because of that colonization. I know that there are, strong racial identities within that country that pre-existed colonization, because Nigeria originally was 2 different countries, which now is kind of manifested by the North and the South, which still don't get along that well. Those are global drivers, and they're all important to know. Then you have to look at the local, and that's the part where you spend time, you talk to people, you look at the physical conditions. I shouldn't be neglecting the technical considerations. For me, I work in water and do water system design. And so I'm going to be looking at, is it a mountainous area? Is it a plain? Do we have to worry about pumping? Will gravity flow the water? What sort of mechanicals will be needed because of the physical conditions? But with that also comes the identities. Is there a fairly homogeneous identity within a community, or is it not, is it a lot of different people from a lot of different places, as we find much more often in the United States than we do sometimes in non-industrialized communities. Then we look at the people, and the people is kind of interesting, because the first thought is, oh, when we're talking about, oh my, I just got a message that my computer is going to restart. I hope that's wrong. Stop. Okay, if I go away, it's because my computer has shut down on me, and I don't know why it's doing that. Anyway, the people involves all the stakeholders associated with the project. And because this all began with looking at humanitarian engineering, we tend to identify the stakeholders as the practitioner, the user, the funder, the regulatory, the NGO facilitator. All of these people are involved in a process and a project for different reasons. And we tend to assume that everybody's in it for the good of the user. What's interesting is there's enough research out now predating me, and my own work is verifying this. There's enough evidence that most people are not even thinking about the user when they're doing a technical design. It's kind of a startling realization, but most projects that are undertaken for purposes other than altruism. And so recognizing that and confronting that first in ourselves and then with all the other stakeholders allows us to find the spaces that can bring people together to still achieve an objective. And everybody, you know, has to be in agreement on what that objective is, and that requires kind of parsing this out through all the different folks. Finally, the process. What is the design? What has to happen? What do we want? Do we want to create a product or an infrastructure that's going to work over time? Do we want to create something that's going to last long enough that the community can get through a tough period and then solve its own problems? Do we want to address a big issue like global climate change, or do we want to address a very small issue like I can't get my water tomorrow? These are the sort of things involved in the process, and it requires a lot of thought. This is essentially a summary of what I just said, that the process then consists of calibrating our own perceptions so that we can minimize our own biases, then assessing the global drivers, the on-the-ground observations with the contextual tool, which I'll show you in a moment, using that to quantify the context that exists in a society, and then applying guidelines that are associated with those quantified influences. Quick review. This is my mathematical equation. See, I don't have a lot in this. My mathematical equations are that user needs are more important than designer knowledge. That's not to say designers, that the practitioner doesn't have to have technical knowledge. It's saying that the technical knowledge has to defer to the needs of the user if the intent is to create something that's going to be used. Seems very obvious, doesn't it? And yet it's incredible how often that doesn't happen, especially in international work. Success actually is the summation of designer adaptability to context and technical knowledge. I've had this discussion with a lot of people. Your technical knowledge has to be incredibly sharp to be that adaptable. We tend to say, well, it's not technical knowledge if I'm working with strip bamboo and twigs and vines. But in fact, some of the most complex technical designs I've seen have been made with saplings that have been chopped down, a little bit of duct tape and burlap bags. So it takes a real creativity of design to do contextual engineering. Self-reflection is a subset of the design process, and I can't emphasize that enough. That constant self-reflection and measurement of why you're doing things, what you're perceiving, and how that might not necessarily fit into the context is the one thing that saves these projects from going completely off the rails sometimes. And finally, the why or the context precedes the how, which is the content. Okay, a couple quick examples. I'm trying to watch my time here so I don't talk too long, because when I get going, it's all hell breaks loose. And 2 hours later, Leon will be saying, stop. I promise, I cut a lot of slides out. Just because my last trip before COVID hit was Ecuador, I've got some good examples from there, and that's why I'm using this. The community that we were working with in Ecuador, no, stop. If anybody knows how to turn this off so it doesn't disconnect me, please let me know, because I don't know how to make this stop.
And I'm just saying, we were the right crowd this afternoon. We've got like 10 people from the Center for Innovation and Teaching and Learning.
Oh, yes. Help,
maybe
this thing is
Suzanne
telling
or
me it's going to
David.
turn me
Yeah,
off in 10 minutes.
it's possible that it's going to. We may have to take a little break while you boot back up. I think
Well, if I
that
disappear,
happens,
I'll come back as soon as it restarts. So I apologize. It's telling me I've got 9 minutes, so maybe I can get through this and then we can come back and I can finish up the kind of the summary. So I want to start with technology standards, because I made a reference earlier to the fact that sometimes standards are not appropriate when you're working in a different context. And I kind of have to swallow hard when I say that, having just, watched us go through the ABET accreditation process. And one of the big things my own department had to do was focus on standards, because it's so important to teach students engineering standards. And I'm teaching our Ag and Bio capstone students, standards are so important. Make sure you understand the standards, but make sure they fit, right? And I always have to kind of whisper that in. Here's an example. The community that we were working with in Ecuador, El Garango, is a rural community not too far from the nearest city, maybe about 10 kilometers away. Has zero water, like zero water. Every bit of water they use, including for farming, is trucked in. They have no groundwater, they have no surface water. That's the project. In the city, Ecuador very much mimics the United States. Okay, so Ecuador uses the US dollar as its currency, and it adheres to safe drinking water standards for water systems. This is a brand new water treatment plant that was constructed to safe drinking water standards, US standards. You can see they've got the powdered activated carbon materials here. This is a modern filtration plant, just like you would find in many cities in the United States. So what's interesting is this is the water that our community that we're working with is buying, and it's bottled in the city and taken out to the community. This slide on the left shows the coliform bacteria that we measured on bottled water, using the water from this treatment plant. That same water we then boiled and cooled and plated out again. And you can see there's zero bacteria on that. Now, for those of you who have worked with coliform bacteria, the purplish is E. coli, and that is harmful. That is bad stuff. That's in their bottled drinking water. Okay, how did that happen? They're following safe drinking water standards. Well, what happened was they put all of their attention to the treatment standards in the treatment plant, but the water is then piped out to the community in dirty pipes that are not pressurized to keep bacteria out. By the time it gets to the bottling plant, the bottles that are used are barely washed before they're refilled. And so by the time this goes through the process and gets to the community, who, by the way, is paying twice as much for this water as the other water that they buy for irrigation. By the time it gets to them, this is actually much worse than the water that they're using that comes off of a truck that they drew out of a ditch down the road. This is an example where adhering to the standards didn't solve any problem. And in fact, what we told the community is forget the bottled water, boil your water. That's all you have to do to get safe drinking water. It's not US standard, but it solves their problem much better. This is another quick example. I worked with a group from Cornell in Culture, Bolivia a couple of years ago, and they had to take some measurements. Well, they were upset because they didn't bring their total station surveying equipment because they couldn't get it there. And they didn't know how they were ever going to take measurements of distance and elevation in this community. The NGO that we were working with showed them how the Inca population did it centuries ago with this triangle of bamboo sticks, and there's a plumb line hanging down here, and it turns out you could walk this along. It's a brilliant piece of engineering. You could walk this along, you'd know the distance that you're walking, and as you measure the change in the plumb line on the center, the crossbar, you can calculate out with very simple trig how the elevation changes. Now that was brilliant. And that's ancient technology that exists on site. And that's how a lot of people still do things, because they don't have total stations in the middle of the Andes, in the middle of nowhere. But I thought what was even more brilliant was what this gentleman from the community did. He had a clear plastic pipe, and he showed us the way he did his measurements on his land, and he would just fill it with water and stake it at a measured distance apart. And then he'd measure how high the water came in the pipe. So you can see this pipe is tied to this stake. The water level is going to be the same wherever you are. And so the change in distance from the ground tells you how much the ground goes up. Incredibly brilliant, incredibly brilliant. And yet these students were so upset that they didn't have their total station to do it that way. I did once work, by the way, with somebody with a total station in Honduras. No, I take that back. He didn't work with a total station. He worked with GPS surveying. And I told him it wouldn't work, and he didn't believe me. And it turns out he only got 3 points in the entire 5-kilometer distance that he was trying to measure, because one, there weren't enough satellites at the time in that latitude, and two, most of the time he was under the trees and couldn't get a reading anyway. So this sort of technology that this gentleman used in Bolivia would have been far more useful than modern technology. Now, we've come up with a term for that in contextual engineering. We call that innovative self-sufficiency. What that gentleman in Bolivia demonstrated was an innovative self-sufficiency. He used what he had to solve an engineering problem, and technically came up with a superior outcome to our state-of-the-art technology. Now, I'm showing this picture from the Dominican Republic because this is not an example of innovative self-sufficiency, but it is an example of an attempt, okay? This was a community I worked with high in the mountains in Dominican Republic near the Haitian boundary. They had a spring and a pipe that ran down to the community. Their solution for keeping leaves and things from getting caught in there was to stuff the top of the pipe with rocks and throw this netting over it. It didn't do a lot. That's not a good example. I'm not sure, let me see if I can get the knife. I'm not sure this is a good example either. They also laid all of their pipe on the ground, did not bury it. It became very brittle because of ultraviolet radiation, and broke routinely. And their solution for this was they've got a wealth of popped bicycle tires, because that's their primary way of getting around, and it's very rocky. So they pop a lot of bicycle tires, and so they save them and use them to seal up the pipes. Again, this is an innovative self-sufficiency. It's not the highest quality, but it shows that they were able to keep their system running using that. Now, this is a great example of innovative self-sufficiency. When I was in Guatemala a year and a half ago, working with, again, a rural community. This was one of the poorest communities in the entire country, and Guatemala is not a wealthy country. This is a sugarcane press that a farmer crafted out of lumber from his fields, and it mimics the sugarcane factories that I saw in India, without the valves and the servos and the meters and the flashing lights, but it does exactly the same thing. You could feed a sugarcane through this, crank it, and get the same juices out of it that an automated piece of equipment would produce. And he did that himself. He figured that out. So I mentioned I'm going to disappear in a minute. I just saw I'm going to disappear in a minute. Leon, when I disappear, if you guys could talk amongst yourselves, and I will come right back and we'll pick it up. We'll talk a little bit about the influences. And I do only have about 5 more minutes, I think, to share with you. So I'll be back.
Okay, and good luck. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, seeing that we got a little bit of an unexpected break, I think it's a good time for maybe some introductions. I'm Leon. I'm with Mechanical Engineering. Kate Labor, could you please say something about you, where you're from?
I'm with the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning, and I'll let Shelley Schmidt introduce herself.
Thank you.
Hi, Shelley Schmidt, Food Science and Human Nutrition, enjoying the examples and making me think a lot. So Jessica, you're up next as far as I can tell. to introduce yourself.
Great. Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm an undergraduate student in mechanical engineering. And I do research under Anne.
Jace, if you can just maybe introduce the next person that you'd like to.
Sure. I'll see who's next on my list. I see Robert Baird.
Yeah, hey, Robert Baird with the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning. It's a great speaker and is very interesting, and I love the approach. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, Chris Schmitz, Electrical and Computer Engineering and Education Innovation Fellow with the College of Engineering.
Can I ask?
Next on my list, I think, is David.
Okay.
My name is David Faber. I'm a teaching and learning specialist with CETL and work with faculty and online pedagogy. I'll pass it on to Yu Ting.
Hi, this is Yu Ting. I'm a teaching assistant professor in electrical and computer engineering, and I'm also advising the team for this semester or this academic year. So I would, let's see, Tim, did you introduce yourself yet?
No, my name's Tim Hale. So I'm a teaching assistant professor in kinesiology and community health and teaching classes in health technology. So we use a lot of design perspectives, human-centered design in that work. So I'm joining the presentation today, Anne.
Tim, thank you. If I may introduce Professor Petros Safronis, he's next to you on my picture, Professor Safronis.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Petros Safronis, professor here in Mechanical Science and Engineering, colleague with Leon. And at the same time, I'm the director of the International Institute for Carbon Neutral Energy Research, a joint effort between the University of Illinois Graduate College of Engineering and Kyushu University in Japan.
Thank you very much, and welcome to you. And next to you on my screen is Chilan Bolin. Good afternoon, Chilan.
Hi. I had turned the light. I was in the dark. I'm Chilan Bolin. I'm in the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning. I work with the academic units and faculty across campus. And I've had the great pleasure of working with Anne on a really innovative course, which was a team-taught course across many disciplines and many areas. And I've also been to Sierra Leone, which and it mentioned, and it's true, you have to be there for a period of time before you really can understand the context.
Yeah. And welcome back. We hope not to break the flow of your presentation, but seeing that we're going, can we just introduce a few more people? Saad Shahab. Good afternoon, Saad.
Good afternoon, Leo. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saad Shahab. I'm postdoctoral research associate at the SIBA Center for Design.
Thank you very much, Saad. And then Nick, is it Nick Lotso or Lozo?
Lotso, hi.
Good afternoon, Nick.
Good. Yeah, I'm actually an alum, graduated mechanical engineering in '96, but I was in EPRL, Engineering Psychology Research Lab, which I don't believe is there anymore. So I basically practice engineering psychology. I do software design, doing very much all of what you're just talking about here, but I do this professionally in software design.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I was fortunate because I was there at the time Mosaic was built. So I basically, as soon as I graduated, joined some consulting companies helping build websites in '96. So I've been applying all of that to website design and software design. So just fascinated to see this. It's really exciting.
Nick, that's awesome. Thanks a lot for joining. Professor John Popovich, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm John Popovich. I'm faculty from Civil and Environmental Engineering. I'm also an Education Innovation Fellow in the College of Engineering. And
thank you very much for joining.
Next, I'll invite Marcia.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm mainly in the Cancer Center now, but also with bioengineering and in education EIF with John and Chris and Yu Ting on here.
Welcome, Marcy. And can I ask Kaylin Junker, please, Kaylin?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kaylin Janke. I am a teaching assistant professor in the Innovation Leadership and Engineering Entrepreneurship. program. I have 2 little children right now, but I worked with Anne. She was on my doctoral committee here at Illinois. So worked with Anne for a number of years.
Welcome, Kaylin. Thank you very much. Sorry for getting your last name wrong.
No, that's fine.
Afternoon, Frank Lugo.
Hi, so I'm Frank. I'm a first year PhD student in mechanical science and engineering working with Dr. Eleni. Thank you for
Very good.
this
Welcome.
great presentation.
Welcome to you, Frank. How about Ben Barnes?
Hi, I'm a mechanical engineering alumni. I worked with Anne on a project in Nigeria about 10 years ago now. And I run a small R&D and product design company in Urbana.
Wow. May I ask what that company is called?
It's called The Product Manufactory.
Wow. Manufactory.
That's correct.
I'm going to Google that. Thank you.
Great.
Welcome. And Abdu. I don't have a last name. Abdu?
Yeah, this is Abdu Alawini. I'm a teaching assistant professor at the computer science. I'm interested in the application of AI in improving education at the large scale. I'm so excited to hear different perspective about engineering education. I am very excited about anything related to engineering education, so that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much. And just very briefly, welcome to you also, Mina Mikhail.
Thank you very much, Leon. It's Mina Mikhail, PhD student in mechanical, enjoying the examples. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. Good luck with your PhD exam. And welcome to Taylor Tucker. Taylor is just about to publish her first book, a children's book, and she's in engineering education. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm a second-year master's student in the Digital Environments for Learning, Teaching, and Agency program, the College of Education. I have a background in engineering mechanics, and yes, like Leon said, I collaborated on a children's book project, creating a STEM-oriented educational book that will hopefully be coming out pretty soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. Anne, I'd like to hand the microphone back to you, seeing that you know a little bit more about our context.
Indeed.
Over to you. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Leon. And thank you everyone for your patience through that nonsense. So that actually was a good breaking point for me to kind of shift into a different gear here now, because we've been talking about what context is and how it manifests and what we need to know about ourselves to do it, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to get to is understanding what it is that's important to a user or a client community, so that we can make the right engineering decisions to meet the needs. And there's some literature that we've refined over the last few years to really focus in on 5 critical influences that determine adoption and maintenance and sustainability of engineered anything. And I'm these are the 5, but I want to show you that they're not the words that they don't mean what we associate them with kind of routinely. When I'm talking about political influences, what I'm really talking about is power dynamics. So if there's a strong political influence among users, that means there's probably a lot of differences in who has authority, who doesn't, who has power, who doesn't, who has money, who doesn't. Economic doesn't mean currency or savings. It means an inability to meet needs. So if there's a high economic influence, it means people perceive themselves not to be able to meet their most basic needs. And that is kind of an interesting way of thinking about it, because it takes away that baseline that we tend to set in the industrialized world of Western countries and say, well, everybody else is poor because they don't have what we do, which is often true, but it's not always true, because there are plenty of populations that don't seek to have the material possessions and savings that we do. They value things differently. Cultural is actually referring, is actually referring to a shared identity. So when you're talking about cultural, you're talking about a common set of beliefs or values or spiritual practices. It's something that's at the core of people that I refer to as their cultural influence. Educational does not refer to how much schooling you've had. In fact, it refers to a desire to acquire knowledge. And I'll extend that out a little bit more in that when I'm talking about educational influence, I'm also talking about people who desire to share the knowledge that they've acquired. So it's acquisition and sharing of knowledge. Mechanical is different, and this is a little harder one to understand because it seems very similar to educational. It's not talking about acquisition of knowledge, it's talking about kind of brute capability to make things work. You know, you hear about people who just have kind of a mechanical knack. This is different from a desire to acquire an understanding of how things work. This is how can they, if you put things in front of them, how will they put them together to make them run? These are the 5 critical influences in anything engineered that determine a context. Now, okay, and again, I'm just going to show this to you. This is the tool that we use to assess that. And this is, there's 41 questions here. These are questions that we vetted through quite a few different locations, quite a few different users. We're still testing this in a number of different situations, modifying this for different purposes. But at the base of this are questions that are not handed to your user. This is not a survey. This is not a questionnaire. This is for the practitioner, the designer, the engineer to ask themselves after they've been exposed to a community. So Chilan, you talked about being in Sierra Leone and how you had to interact with Sierra Leone to really understand it. These are the sort of questions that you can't answer just by going and looking and walking away. You have to interact, you have to work at it. And it was funny, when we first started using this, Engineers Without Borders USA, by the way, now uses this and provides this to all new projects. And when we first started testing this with Engineers Without Borders, professional and student groups, and then we'd interview them afterwards about how it worked. The most common response we'd get is, well, I didn't know what you wanted me to put here. And it's like, yeah, you're supposed to think about what to put here. That's the whole point of this. The responses to that questionnaire come back through a series of calculators, spreadsheet calculators. Anybody in computer science would have a wonderful laugh at the programming that's involved here because it's painfully bad. But what it does, but it works. And what it does is it takes those numbers, those numbers that are associated with the questions, spreads them out in a weighted way across the influences, indicators of those influences, compares it to national scores for a given place, and then reweights it based on country influence before giving a relative outcome, relative influence on a scale of 0 to 100. Where in that 100 do each of these 5 influences fall? I'll show you this a little more in a minute. When we use this tool, and we do have this available for anybody who wants to use it, you just have to go onto our website. It's contextual.engineering.illinois.edu, and you make an account so that we protect our intellectual property. You can download that tool, you can play with it, you can test it with any population internationally that you want. We're developing a domestic one as well. And one of our developers is on this call, I see. So we're still kind of beta testing that. It's got a way to go. But if you're working with an international population, try it out, send it back. You'll get a report like this. It has more pages than this. It'll make some specific recommendations, but these are general guidelines for what each of those influences mean. This is a little easier to read. It's the same thing. What it's saying is if you come back with a very high cultural influence relatively, you need to make sure you know what that culture is. You need to identify the client's beliefs, identities, and constraints. If there's a high political influence, you need to figure out who's in charge and make sure you don't offend them. You need to be able to address everyone's needs, but recognizing that you can't violate the power structure in place. There's a high economic influence. It means look for low demand, low maintenance type designs, low cost. People are spread thin. They're not feeling like they're meeting their needs now. They don't want anything that's going to make their lives more put upon. High educational means you can actually work with your client to develop some new approaches. You can talk with them about how they'd like to see it evolve and develop it from there. High technical is where we try to involve the client most, because they know how to make things run. They don't necessarily want to try something new, but they know how to make what they've got run. Make sure you know what they've got and what they know how to run, because they'll keep it going forever. What we found in using this predictive tool is it actually has two benefits, and the benefits for design that are provided in that report that I've been talking about, that's all kind of for the engineer to reassure you that there are numbers associated, and this is like empirical and calculated. The reality, the biggest value of this tool, though, is for the users of the tool, the practitioners themselves, because it creates in them an awareness of the impact that their design is going to have. It prepares them for going into the field and working with their client by thinking about these questions in advance. It allows them to carry themselves differently, to comport themselves with the community in a less judgmental way, because they're already kind of prepped to think about certain things that require a degree of humility to assess. And finally, they allow for creation of more of a familiarity and a collegiality with their client community or the users of the intended design. And these have all been verified, that these are the outcomes of using this tool. And to me, that's the most important benefit of this whole thing. I just published a paper. It's actually not out in print yet. It's just pre-published right now, taking a look a little bit more at how to use this tool most effectively. Is it best for one person to use it and come back? Is it better for an entire group to use it together? This is the kind of an example of the breakdown of the 5 influences for a given user. Wow, excuse me, a given user. And what's important, you don't even have to look at the one on the left, other than to recognize that in any row, the red is the highest influence, the green is the lowest influence. That's the important thing, because that's telling you what's relatively most important in a community. The reason I'm sharing this is because when I was running these tests, one group of professionals that I was working with who were preparing to travel to Panama downloaded the tool and wanted to use it. One of their members got a little excited about it and decided she knew everything about the community already, so she filled it out before she left. She sent it back to me. I told her I will not give you the results because I don't want to skew your perceptions when you get there, but do it again afterwards and let's compare. And user 1, pre and post travel. Pre-travel, she thought she knew everything about this community and tested out as a high economic influence. After she returned, that was the lowest influence. The highest influence was cultural for her community. To kind of compare that to everybody else who did it, including people who live there, the translators are from that community, the community liaison, everybody else agreed that cultural is significantly higher. The local resource, that's one of those people that was kind of on that tipping oversaturated situations, and we talked with them, and that really was the case. But for everybody else, cultural came through very strongly. And what that shows is when you think you know the context from a distance, you shouldn't get too confident. Well, we wanted to test this a little bit more. And so before we went to Ecuador, I traveled with 6 students to Ecuador. I had them fill out the tool based on the knowledge that they had gathered from their NGO partner, from Engineers Without Borders, and their communications with the community. And I just think this is fascinating because of the 6 students, 2 of them saw cultural as most important, 2 saw political most important, 1 saw educational, 1 saw mechanical, none saw economic. And when we averaged them, cultural ended up being the most significant influence. After they traveled, every single one of them saw economic influence as the most critical for this community. This is the one influence none of them saw before they traveled. And that tells you that that context cannot be identified effectively before you immerse in the community, the society the user group that you want to work with. And I think this very much bears out, Leon, a lot of your explorations with human-centered design, that if you're not thinking about that client, that user, you're going to miss the mark thinking you know, it's just like you. And I'm just about done. I know I'm running over here, but I just want to share with you, one of my PhD students recently developed a way of charting this out by community, where he took, if each influence was 20%, right? Each was equally important. What's the relative influence, you know, the difference? And I'm just going to show this to you. This is an animation here of all the communities that we've run this test on. That didn't work. Hold on. Oh, come on. There it goes. Okay. And I'd like to point out, some of these communities are right next to each other, but this shows how dramatically different context is from one population to another. And to assume that context is irrelevant and standards govern is assuming that everybody's the same and just like us. And this just demonstrates how that's not the case. And so finally, if you pick up your phones once more, I'd love to hear after this talk what you would vote for as the 3 most critical bits of information to gather when you're working on an engineering design for users from an unfamiliar society. And I'm going to start this, and it's actually working. Okay, and you only have 10 seconds to pick up to 3. Okay, let's see what we get. Community identity, stakeholder motivations, and power dynamics. Excellent. The other one that I would probably would have put as critical is practitioner perspective. Because I think recognizing your own role and your own perspective helps you to deal with so many of these other things. That is all I've got. I'm sorry I went a little over, but I really appreciate your attention today.
And thank you so very much for this fascinating presentation. And I'm sorry we lost a few people along the way. See, I don't think we should cut this off immediately, but may I ask if anyone would like to direct any questions to Anne in, let's say, the next 5 minutes? Anne, if you still have a few minutes available.
I do. I have a few
Thank you.
minutes, yeah.
Would anyone like to direct a question or maybe a comment to Anne?
Yeah. Anne, when you said that the practitioner, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too, Chilan.
About what is the amount of time that you think is sufficient in order for the practitioner to fill out this form?
That's actually something we're looking at right now. Great question. It's kind of funny. What I'm seeing is that a minimum of 10 days to 2 weeks is needed to really immerse enough and get a feel. In part because a lot of times when you're working with a different population, they need some time to get acclimated to you. It's not just about you getting acclimated to them. And so building that relationship, building that trust takes a little bit of time. I've found that more than a month, you start to lose you're not making gains anymore. It seems like more than a month, it's just icing on the cake. Too much longer than that, you start running into the risk of identifying with a segment of the population.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chilan. It's a fascinating tool that you have there, and a very important one. And I understand that, Tim, you might have an immediate application of this tool in some of your studies or courses.
Well, I just thought it was very interesting. It could be applied like to understanding healthcare settings, where oftentimes a lot of the problems with creating technology or intervention type approaches is related to what you were saying, Anne, where people don't really understand the context. They don't understand all the stakeholders who are involved. They don't really understand the culture of medicine or healthcare, how it's practiced in different settings. And even within the United States, how much that can vary between a hospital setting or a community clinic setting or across regions of the country. So a tool like this could give a design team like an opportunity to kind of evaluate this while they're doing their ethnographic work in that first couple weeks. And then they would have some kind of parameters of where they need to focus their attention and maybe where the priorities need to be weighed in terms of some of the decision-making process. So,
Yeah,
and if nothing else, I think it could just, in terms of that reflective sort of aspect, make them aware of the different parameters and their assumptions that they had when they went in and be more critical about that as they started their process. So I think it'd be really fascinating to try to see how that worked in some of
Yeah.
those kind of more focused applications. Like
It's interesting you raise that, Timothy, because we're actually in the process of developing a research protocol. Actually, hopefully it's been approved to assess rural mental health interventions. And for exactly as you were talking about, because so many times, and a lot of my research focuses on rural areas because that's where identities don't get quite as watered down by global connectivity as in cities. And that's true in the United States too. And we're looking at, even in Illinois, identifying communities, rural communities of differing type and different parts of the state, and assessing whether a lot of the remote technology that's being applied now for mental health services, especially the non-acute, really work. Because if you're working with a population that's maybe low literacy or economically disadvantaged, or kind of ethnic and doesn't speak English. I know we have a number of communities that have been populated by immigrants who have come to certain areas. This is the sort of thing where we can identify what they need before trying to shove an app at them. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And thank you very much. Thanks, Tom. If I may, Petros is director of the International Institute for Carbon Neutral Research, which is based in Japan. And pre-COVID-19, he used to travel to Japan twice a month. That was his context. But Petros, how do you interact with the Japanese culture, where we're talking about a hydrogen economy? Do you also do ethnographic research? Do you have a questionnaire that you give to stakeholders in Japan, for instance, and compare it, with a similar questionnaire that you give to people in America?
Yes. In fact, I was planning to ask, a question within this context, how we interact with the Japanese. Yes, Japan is another culture, it's not a Western culture. In fact, I myself realized how Western I am, right? Only after I started spending time in Japan. So here we Westerners think, I think in the Western way, and it is different from the way other cultures think. Now, yes, regarding energy, for instance, right now, the public, the society is adamantly opposed to nuclear energy in Japan. There is no way that we, the scientists or the technologists, can tell them nuclear energy is a clean energy solution pathway. You cannot attain carbon neutrality by the year 2050, as the new Prime Minister, Mr. Suga, just announced on Monday at the Japanese Parliament. Unless you go about employing some nuclear also, because Japan doesn't have any other energy resources. So the cultural issues and the societal aspects of the technology are very important. Very important how you can implement new technologies. You need to analyze. People and the socioeconomics of energy is a big aspect in our own institute. In fact, we have a sociologist who really studies the reactions and the inputs from the Japanese public. So that's I definitely agree in this regard with whatever we heard today. On the other hand, I have a question. Sometimes, again, I'm coming from the angle of technology. Sometimes people don't know about technology, and once they see it, they get animated. In other words, sometimes you have to override the culture. I can give you my own personal example as a child. I grew up in Greece. I was born in Greece. The first time that I saw electricity was I sensed and felt electricity when I was 10-year old. You see, I was studying with a petroleum lamp when I was a child in the elementary school. And when the electricity came, I remember April 23, I think, 1968, in my remote village. That was perhaps one of the happiest moments in the entire village's life. And we were so thankful to science and engineering that it eventually arrived. So how do you take this in order to go against the culture or reinvigorate the culture or show the culture something that there is something else that the Americans, for instance, know and have?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I have to be careful, and I didn't make this disclaimer, but I should, that contextual engineering isn't opposed to introducing new technology or to enhancing technology. It's just encouraging assessing what the user community society is looking for. My guess is that if I were to go and do a contextual analysis in Greece when you were a child, I would find that there was a real thirst that though there is a unique culture to Greece, it's not the governing influence. And I would bet, just from the way you're describing it, that probably educational influence would be more important. And that would tell me we can bring new technology in. People they have a thirst for that. I've also been to communities that don't want to be bothered with something like electricity. So you're right that there are plenty of places that not only welcome but want and need Western technology and Western support. It's this idea of doing it deliberately and intentionally rather than just saying, well, they're not like us, we'll help them get like us. That's why I refuse to use the term developing countries. I will not use that term because it suggests that other countries are trying to get to our level. And I've been in many places in the world that are considered low-level developing countries that are vastly more developed than we are socially. So.
Thank you very much. And Nick, from your perspective, from your context.
John, can I add something to concur with
Please.
that point that Anne has just said? Now going back to Greece and meeting my childhood friends, right? Sometimes they tell me the following: we want you to leave us alone because they view me as an American who is bringing all the technological innovations that made their lives now difficult because now they cannot compete.
Exactly.
You see, this global economy now, these countries, they cannot compete with us. I mean, the center of the West, and the young people don't have jobs, and so they want to be left alone. This is what they tell me, laughingly, of course. But definitely, they want to educate their children here. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charles, thank you. That's a really important point you made, and how you answered it. I wish there was more time for us to chat, and I wish there was more time that we could subject our students, like Jessica. Jessica, you're in the fortuitous position that you've been working with Anne for a while now. I wish Anne could come to my classes every semester. So I'm going to take what I've learned from you, Anne, and I'm going to, not just in engineering education, because I've got a different perspective on things now. But I also want to give my students a different perspective on how they practice engineering, how they design, etc. And context is crucial. But Nick, can I ask you from your professional perspective, is there anything that you'd like to add? Maybe a question that you'd like to raise, or a comment that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I'm one of the where I'm always struggling with is, I'm always the one who's trying to bring ethnography and user research to the software development processes. So I'm always trying to drag engineers with me. So getting them to be good researchers is what I'm always trying to do. And in the end, I'm like, I always feel bad because I have to make these shortcuts because it's like in the end, I feel like as long as I can get the engineer sitting side by side with the CSR agent, because we're redesigning the software, that's great, even if they're horrible researchers. But I liked your checklist because it's like, if I could give them something to guide them and focus, that would be great, but it would be even more productive. So that's what I find interesting. And I want to look through that to see how I might be able to adapt that to software development, not physical. And I'm also jealous because I'm a mechanical engineer and I've never, ever professionally used all the hard work I did as an undergrad to get that degree. And I just like pivoted to software development and design. So I wish this program was there when I was there. I would have maybe had a chance to use my engineering.
Yeah. I'd be happy to work with you too on adapting that.
Okay, oh, I'd love that.
Because
yeah.
I'm actually, we just, I think yesterday submitted a proposal to do something similar on materials science,
Okay.
data collection, and it is going to involve an ethnographic understanding of how material science scientists test and record and maintain and check back their records, because that's such a laborious process. And from what I hear, it consists of people with notebooks right now, that's how they do it. And to bring them into using software, first you have to figure out what they need and how they use it. So it's, I'm on the same page with you. I'd be happy to work with you. Let me know.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Oops, you got muted.
I'm sorry. Would anyone perhaps like to make a last comment or raise a question? Kaylin?
A quick question.
David.
Yeah, as Professor Safranis was talking, I was thinking about the context variable of time. He described his village in Greece as being very receptive to something, and then now he goes back, now they're not, to the same type of influence. Have you ever done any maybe long-term studies where you introduce the engineering thing prior and they score one way and then it changes the economy and then wow, pow, things have changed?
I have not, only because this is 3-year-old discipline. I've got anecdotal demonstrations because I had started working internationally without really formulating the whole theory behind this, but still doing it for about 15 years now. And I have gone back to some communities and I have seen changes, and you're absolutely right. And that's part of the reason in my definition of context, I talk about how I'm looking for it here because I want to make sure I say it, you know, it is associated with the time. It's a place and a people at that particular time. That's an important point, and I'm glad you raised that, David, that this isn't, you don't go to a place, do a contextual analysis and say, okay, they're locked in for all time.
You can never walk in the same river twice, as they say.
Exactly. And so,
No,
and that's one of the things we try to think about in context is how people are going to change, not just their attitude in relation to the engineered process. Yeah.
Thank you.
David, that's a very important point. And that also links to what Petros just now mentioned about, you know, him being deemed an outsider now in Greece. You know, time has marched on, and it's different to you're comparing apples with pears now. And if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, it seems like we can carry on for a whole lot longer this afternoon. And we so enjoyed this afternoon's presentation. I'm going to reach out to you regarding engineering education, because I have a few things that I believe we as our little SIP team called Engine, Engagement in Engineering Education. Some of the things that you mentioned this afternoon, I believe we can practice. It's the way we assess our students and to find out their context, and to better empathize with the students. So, and if you don't mind, I'd just like to say something in conclusion. So I'm from South Africa. So if I show a quote from Aristotle, I'm not familiar with that context. My wife speaks Greek fluently because she lived in Athens for 8 years, but she's Swiss, she's French. She picks up languages very quickly. I do not. She lived in South Africa with me after we were married. We got married after 6 weeks after we met, by the way. She lived in South Africa for 4 years. For the first year, she felt like a tourist in the country. Everything was wonderful. And then she started picking up the finer nuances, the stuff the local people were struggling with. So what you said really hits to the bone, in the sense that it takes a while to get to grips with a community's feel. But being from Southern Africa, I don't know how many are familiar with the word ukama. Now the Shona people are from Zimbabwe, but there are about 3.5 million of them in South Africa. And I got to know a Shona person very well in Johannesburg. His name is Lucky. He didn't teach me this word. I found this out later. But ukama is the word that describes relatedness. But it's not just how I relate to other people, it's how I relate to nature and how I relate to people. And I initially spoke about phronesis and this wisdom from the Greek perspective, but from an African perspective, the Ukamian sense of looking at things is very much this holistic way of looking at how we relate to the people around us, our community, to other people around the world, but more importantly for me is how we relate to Earth, nature. We've become so focused on, we've become so human-centered. We talk about human-centered design. Everything is so humanistic. It seems like we've become out of touch with on where we're from, nature. And I guess that to a certain extent explains the problems that we have at the moment in the world. Whether we talk about ecology, we talk about natural problems, we talk about floods, fires, we're not living sustainably. But this sense of ukama is really for me what appeals to me. But Anne, after I read your three of your papers, that's really what contextual thinking is about. And in engineering design, at least, context has to precede the solution. That's absolutely crucial in my mind. And I'd like to thank you for sending home a few points so well. I will make available this video recording to all participants. I'd like to thank everyone for staying so late. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you so much for your time. And good luck with your future work. You're doing really important work. And thank you for opening up the eyelids of people. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone.
So much.
Thank you.
Keep well.
Thank you, Anne. It was great seeing you again.
You too. You too. Take care.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great to meet you.
Yes.
Evcharisto, Professor Sophronis. And I wish I could say something in each of the other home languages, mother tongues. Evcharisto.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we'll catch up separately.
Good, good. Looking forward to it.
Okay, bye, Anne.
Hey, Kaylin, there's one of them.
Oh,
hey.
Video's a little hard when I have some
Kaylin,
That's
Kaylin,
another person I haven't seen in so long.
Yeah.
Kaylin, your context is totally different to everyone's. Who is that person with you? Please introduce this beautiful little girl.
This is Taya.
Hey.
18 months old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can you just say
the cat is photobombing.
Can you just say the name again, please?
Taya, T-A-Y-A.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I see you've got a cat there with you as well. And Kate, I'll also a cat with you.
Hi. Hi.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Nice meeting you all. Thanks, Robert.
Bye,
Thanks.
See everyone.
Bye-bye, Taya.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks, Robert. All the best. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.